Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to The Wire Live. This is Liverpool FC Wire podcast. I'm Aaron James, and this is your Liverpool newscast. Guys, we're going to talk what could be another momentous summer at Anfield. It really genuinely could. You know, look, the whole Slot situation rumbles on. You know, what happens with him? Is he staying? Is he going? You know, We'll talk a little bit about that one. We'll talk, obviously, as well about the players. You know, look, there is so many stories going round at this present moment in time as regards which players are staying, which players are going, and you know, certain players who are likely to leave, certain players who, you know, perhaps have reached the end of their time in Liverpool because of a number of reasons. You know, some that don't want to be here anymore because of the manager, some that genuinely just want to play more football and not getting enough time under this manager. Obviously, you know, as well, who do we sign? You know, what is the situation with the finances? You know, I think what we've heard in terms of the future is that last summer was a one-off. You know, that's not going to happen again. You know, we'll go back to normal levels of spending from now on, you know, given the fact that Liverpool did blow nearly £500 million on new players, although we did bring in, I think it was 280 million in incoming fees as well in terms of the sales likes of Darwin Núñez, Luis Diaz, etc., etc. So, look, you know, I think it is a summer of change. And I think, if I'm being honest, there is a worry within the fan base that we will again hear the same old excuse, which is that it's a transition season next season because we are changing, you know, we're changing players, we're bringing in new players, we're betting in new systems, we're betting in new players, yada, yada, yada. I suppose, you know, look, that isn't going to work again for a second season. I don't think there's many fans who are going to buy that excuse for a second season. And look, I don't, as I said, I've said on a number of videos now and a number of podcasts as well, I don't buy the transition season shit. I really genuinely don't. You know, for me, this season was never about transition. And you can go back and you can call me a liar if you want. Of course you can. You can call me whatever you want. I don't really care. But, you know, you can go back to the start of the season and look at the stories and the words that were coming out of Richard Hughes, that were coming out of you know, Arne Slot's mouth, talking about the squad, the team that we were building. The team was being built to win, to dominate, to be successful. And, you know, look, you can talk all you want about transition, but this season was never transition. It was never meant to be transition. It was never going to be a transition season. That narrative only started once the season went south. That's when it started. You know, when... After those, you never once heard transition season during the first 5 games of the season, did you? You never heard, oh, this is a season of change. This is a season of moving from one to the other. It wasn't there. It wasn't there. That's rubbish. It's pathetic. You know, it's just not the case at all. Right, look, let's start off with grasping the nettle that is the manager. People talking about him being here. That's what people are saying, that he's going to be here, that he's going to be the manager, that Arne Slot will continue as head coach, that FSG see that there's been mitigating factors, that FSG see that, you know, there will be changes, you know, there won't be changes, they'll keep Slot in place, and it's a consistency of approach. And I understand that. I get that. However, you know, I think one of the things that is, I think, concerning Slot and concerning a lot of people is this contract situation. You know, Arne Slot in June enters the final 12 months of his deal. That's a fact. You know, that is an undisputable fact. The guy enters the last 12 months of his deal. Now, at this point in time, there is no new contract on the table. FSG have not come forward with a new contract and said, right, Arne, you are the man for definite. We are backing you for the long term. Here's a new contract, a new long-term contract. You know, sign this new long-term contract and then we'll go in the summer and we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll build this and we'll build that. No contract. It's almost to me as if FSG are hedging their bets. They're kind of looking at the situation and going, right, look, we don't really want to sack him now because it's going to cost us too much money. Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes are kind of sitting there going, well, we don't want to prove that we've made a shit decision. Our 27 anyway, we'll just leave in 2027 and it won't actually matter anymore. So they're doubling down on their decision. They love it on a slot. They think slot is the best thing since sliced bread. That's the way it is. So, you've got a situation here where the people at the very top of the organisation, the sporting director and the CEO are both saying, backing the manager. You've got a situation where FSG are not prepared to put their money where their mouth is and are looking at the situation and going, right, well, we can hedge our bets. Let's give them another season. And if it's going shit again, if it starts the season and we buy some players and things don't go right and we start playing poorly again and the style is still shit and the fans are still unhappy and, we get knocked out of competitions and when we're not doing well in the league, then that's when we sack him because it's going to cost us less money. It's going to, it's going to be a situation where we can go, well, look, we gave him a bit longer. We see if it would work and it hasn't worked. That's the concern. Because the moment that happens, the moment you get to sort of October, November time, which is kind of the prime time for then sacking managers ready for the January transfer window, bringing in a new manager, you can then say, well, the season's fucked. The season's over. Season's written off. Forget the season. Forget that season. And that's another season gone. It's another season out the window, gone, disappeared, title challenge out the window, whatever. It's almost Brendan Rodgers 2.0-esque, isn't it? It's almost the same sort of situation like Brendan Rodgers, where they did that review, they overhauled his coaching staff, and again, there's talks of the overhaul of the coaching staff with, Giovanni van Bronckhorst being linked with a move back to Holland to go to Feyenoord to be their technical director, and Liverpool bringing in Johnny Heitinga again into the coaching staff, which I think will help. Heitinga certainly seems to be very popular with the players. And you go back to the start of the season and a lot of people were talking about Heitinga being a huge miss and how the players loved working with Heitinga and how Heitinga was the guy who pretty much ran training sessions and did a lot of what made Liverpool successful last season. So bringing him back in may help, especially if Slot is staying. So, we get to that point again, October, November time, and he gets the sack and then we're writing the season off. So FSG are kind of hedging their bets and hoping that, that come October, November time, they can go, whoa, look at how well it's going. We're top of the league, or we're in the top two. We're doing brilliant in the Champions League. We're through in the Carabao Cup. We're flying along in this. Let's give him a new contract now because, Arnie, you're doing a great job. Here's a new contract. Now, the only issue, of course, is that the moment you enter the last 12 months of your deal as a manager, the players have got even more excuse to go, fuck it, I can't be arsed. Down tools, give up, don't want to play for this manager. We kind of felt last season we didn't really want to play for him, and now they've doubled down and kept him, and we really don't want to play for him now because we don't like him. So let's just give up. Let's just not bother anymore. Let's just not play until he gets sacked, and then he goes. And then the new manager comes in, you get your new manager bounce, and it kind of turns into a Manchester United situation. You bring in someone like Stevie G if he hasn't got a job on a temporary basis, or someone like that, Robbie Fowler, whoever, to the end of the season, and we get trapped in that sort of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Michael Carrick kind of wheel of death that they get trapped in, down the M62. So, and look, and for what it's worth, I hope Michael Carrick does get the job. I think I'd love him to be the new Man United manager, because if he is the new Man United manager, guess what happens? They finish mid-table next season, guarantee it. But getting back to our situation, look, Fabrizio Romano has talked about this end-of-season review. Paul Gorst has kind of suggested that this end-of-season review has kind of already taken place and that Slot's staying. It's happening. He's not going to go anywhere. I just don't accept that this has happened, that this is it. The FSG are going to accept this. You look at how they behaved with the Boston Red Sox this season, how Boston have started the season really badly and they've sacked Alex Cora and all his staff. Remember, this is a guy, Alex Cora, and as I tried to explain on the video yesterday, Alex Cora won a World Series as the Boston Red Sox manager, which is breaking the curse of the Bambino, which was a big thing that Boston would never win another World Series because of the curse of the Bambino. Go and Google it if you don't know what the curse of the Bambino is. And he'd won a World Series. He'd done something that no Boston manager had done in years, and it was an amazing achievement, and yada, yada, yada. But they sacked him because he was shit, and he didn't do a good job, and it was all going wrong, and they wiped out the coaching staff, and they've started again. So FSG, I think John W. Henry does have that in his makeup to look at something and go, this ain't going well. This is crap. Let's sack it. And I think, look, I'm as dubious of FSG as the next man. Look, I am. I don't trust FSG to the extent that a lot of people do. FSG, do still, I think, are very money motivated. Of course they are. Anybody is who runs a business, and that's unfortunately what football is these days. It is a business. And anyone who runs a business wants to make money out of said business, don't they? That's it. That's the way it is, because it's all about cash. But I think we do have to accept that FSG do like to win things. They do like trophies. They do like winning things. They do like being the best. And sometimes they don't always show that. But, and I'm not sitting here defending them, but I think if we are in a situation, we're looking at this end of season review, and FSG sit down and look at it and actually look at the situation that we are in, where we are finishing, say, third or fourth, and we are way behind. And it's not finishing third or fourth that makes the difference. It's not qualifying for the Champions League that makes the difference. I think if they sit down at the end of the season and they see we're 12, 15 points behind the eventual champions, whether that be Arsenal or Man City, hope it's Man City, and we're 12, 15 points behind them, and we didn't win it. We were knocked out. We were humiliated in the Champions League by PSG. We were knocked out of the Carabao Cup by Palace. We were knocked out of the FA Cup, humiliated by Manchester City. They sit down and they look at that. Part of me still thinks they sit there and they go, this isn't good enough. We spent 500 million nearly, or 480 million in the summer, and this is what we get back for our money. This is the return for our money. Sorry, Arna. See you later. Bye-bye. To me, it's still up in the air. And I think the truth lies somewhere in between. And I think, yes, it is trending towards the manager staying. I get that. And these stories that are coming out saying, FSG have not spoken to Xavi Alonso. FSG have not spoken to Julian Nagelsmann. FSG have not spoken to Seb Honis. Have not spoken to Bob Smith, whoever the manager is, or next manager could be. That is kind of, I think, standard. You're not going to get in a situation where it's going to come out they have spoken to other managers, because if it comes out, then it undermines the manager they've got now, and they're still running for Champions League. They're still wanting to compete to get as high in the Premier League as possible, to get as much prize money as possible. They're not going to undermine our slot. So, to me, the truth lies somewhere in between, I think. Yes, it is trending perhaps 80-20 towards him staying, but there's still that percentage chance, I believe, that he could be got rid of by FSG when they actually sit down and look at this and look at it with a dispassionate situation. And we're always told, aren't we, how data-driven they are. What we're hearing as the reasons they're going to keep him are those stories about, Diogo Jota's death, the injuries, this, that, and the other. That's got nothing to do with data. That's all empathetic. That's all, this semantic reasons and all that. FSG are not driven by that. FSG are data-driven animals. They're going to sit and look at the data. This is what we put in. This is what we got back. This is how we finished here. This is our points total. This is this. That data isn't good enough. You're gone. And I think you've got to look at it from that element. And I think the journos that are reporting that, it's all down to mitigating circumstances, it's down to the death of Jota, it's down to the interrupted pre-season, it's down to the injuries, it's down to players taking time to bed in. That's not data. That's not data-driven. And that is not FSG. FSG are data-driven animals. That's what they are. They're data-driven animals. And to some extent, I think that could very heavily influence what happens with Arne Slot in the summer and possible changes. Like I said, I know we're hearing that Heitinga could be brought back, but again, I do believe that is very much dependent on what happens with the manager. If Slot is still here in the start of the new season in August, then yeah, I think there is a really good chance Johnny Heitinga comes back in the summer and becomes into the coaching staff, especially if Gio van Bronckhorst leaves, which I think there is a high chance he could do that. Look, he's going to want the promotion, he's going to want the pay increase, the increase in status, going from being an assistant manager or coach, whatever position he is, assistant head coach, to become a technical director for Feyenoord, a club that he played for and obviously, has a history with. He won the league there as a manager. So, look, I think there is still that element there that we could see the return of Heitinga if Slot is staying. And I think, like I said, it is trending towards Slot staying, but I don't think it is cut and dried as people are saying it is. Right, let's have a little look, shall we? Look, we're looking at this summer, and we're looking at the squad this summer. And you look at the squad and you look at the situation with the squad and what could happen, in terms of players and players leaving, players going. Now, we know that Andy Robertson is going. We know that Mo Salah is going. They've already said as much, And look, there's been all sorts of conspiracy theories as to why Mo's going and Andy Robertson's going. The conspiracy theory is that Mo Salah doesn't want to play for Arne Slot. He's got no intention of ever playing for Arne Slot. He doesn't like Arne Slot. And the fact that he found out that Arne was staying, is the reason why he isn't honouring the second year of his contract, etc., etc., etc. That I don't for a minute think that is 100% true. I honestly believe that the reason Salah is going, and Salah is not stupid. Salah is not an idiot. He's a very clever man. He will have looked at this season and looked at how this season's gone and said, look, it ain't going well. I'm not playing. I'm struggling. I'm not finding it as easy as I once did. Now's the time to move. Now's the time to go before it's too late. The saying, isn't it? It's better to die a hero than live long enough to become the villain. And Salah doesn't want to become a villain. He doesn't want to become a player that gets dropped, is sitting on the bench lots, and some fans start to turn on because he's not putting in the level of performance he did previously. Players are very evaluative. Well, not all players, but players like him, I think, are intelligent enough to see when the time is up and when it's time to move on. And I think that's where we are, with Mo. Guys, obviously, please smash a like on the video. Obviously, as well, please subscribe to the channel. Please, obviously, help us to keep on growing the channel. Hit that sub button. Help us to keep on pulling up the numbers. We want to get to 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. So please like, comment, share, and, of course, subscribe to the Liverpool FC Wire podcast. As I said before, we are looking to bring podders on board. If you're a Liverpool fan, let me know. Drop me an email, guys. Channel's email, I'll drop it in the live chat now. The channel's email is lfcwirepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to obviously become a podcaster, then that's the email address. Drop me an email. Let me know, as much about you as possible in terms of your fandom. I don't really care. I'm not talking about your family and all that and how tall you are or what you like to eat and all that. Just you as in terms of your fandom, and we'll get back to you as soon as is possible. Right, back to this squad. So, like I said, we know that Mo's going. Andy Robbo is also going as well. And look, Andy Robbo going is sad. I mean, I like Robbo. I love Robbo to bits. I think Robbo's great. My big upset with Andy Robertson is that he was never ever offered a new contract. That to me is bad. We should have offered Robbo a new deal. We should have at least tried to keep him. And the fact that Robbo was never offered a new contract, I think is a sin. I think it's a massive sin that Robbo was never offered a new contract. I would have loved to see him, get out there, get a new deal, and at least be offered the chance to stay. Now, I get that, Robbo wants to play more minutes. He wants to be a player that gets on the pitch more. He wants to be a player that, is part of the squad and is part of the first team. And I think, look, Robbo's proved this season, when he has played, that he's not finished by any stretch of the imagination. So I do think it's a worry that he's going. Like I said, for the fact that we're losing a very good backup left back. Milos Kerkez, yes, I think is the future of Liverpool at left back. Of course he is. Milos is a good player. He's got better as the season's gone on, and I think Milos will go from strength to strength as Liverpool's left back. But losing Robbo, what do you do then? Where do you go next after that? We talk about Kostas Tsimikas coming back, and look, as I said, on the video yesterday, I love Kostas. I absolutely love Kostas. He's, I love the song, love him as a player, but Kostas is nowhere near in the same class as Andy Robertson. And do you really want a situation where if Milos gets injured next season, you're relying on Kostas Tsimikas against the likes of Man United? You're relying on him in the Champions League? I don't. And are Liverpool going to go and sign a left back? Well, probably not, because there's priorities elsewhere. And we already know that we're not going to spend vast sums of money this summer, the same way we did last summer. We were told now that's a one-off. So we're not going to go out and buy, the player X, player Y, player Z, and all these other players, and obviously then go and buy a left back as well. So, at the end of the day, what do we do there? And it is a big question for me on that one. Going live this afternoon, we are live here on YouTube. We are also live on TikTok as well. We have a TikTok channel on there. Please obviously get your comments in. We're talking about the summer of change that's probably going to come up, the players that are probably going to leave the club. Right, let's have a look. At the moment, we look at the squad. Now, we look at the situation with Alisson Becker. Alisson Becker, obviously, stories linking him with a move to Juventus this summer. There's stories going around that Alisson is tempted by a move back to Italy, would be tempted to go back to play, would be tempted to go to play in Turin. The fact that Juve are offering him a 3-year contract, a longer contract that Liverpool are prepared to offer him, it's a worry because he is another senior player. He's another senior player. Now, this for me is threefold worrying. Threefold worrying that Alisson could leave. One is you're losing another leader. You know, we're already losing Mo, we're losing Robbo. Now, if you lose Alisson Becker as well, you've lost another leader from this team. And that's a concern. That's a big, big worry. It really is a big, big worry. You know, that if you're losing another a leader from this team, and the best goalkeeper in the world still, in my opinion, you know, still one of the best keepers in the world. The second, obviously, big worry is this. You know, you let Alisson leave. Who is his replacement? Mammalashvili, to me, is not, you know, is definitely not a player who, you know, can take over. You know, he's not a player who can, you know, be, I think, the long-term answer. You know, I don't think he is a number one. I think he's a number two. I think he's a very good. I think he's a decent number two. I think he's like Mike Hoopery, Adrian kind of person. I don't think he's a starting keeper. So if Alisson leaves, we're automatically weakening that goalkeeping position. And look, I don't rate Mammalashvili. I think his distribution is poor. I think he doesn't command his area well. You know, he hasn't got the presence. And I think the defence looks a hell of a lot more nervous when he's back there than when Alisson's back there. So, you know, for me, like I said, you're losing that. And also that third reason, like I said, this is the best keeper in the world. And how much does it cost to replace him? How much does it cost to replace him? That's the big thing. You know, we've heard Kelleher talk about missing Liverpool. We've heard Kelleher talk about the fact that, you know, he loves Liverpool, that he would love to come back to Liverpool, that he loves Scousers, that he misses the city. You know, we've heard all this from Kameen Kelleher. You know, just to recap what Kelleher said the other day, he said this about the situation that he's in. He said, Liverpool is a special place for me. I lived in the city centre for 5 years and loved it there. I just miss the people at the club. I have a lot of good friends there. I miss them. I miss the city and the Scousers. You know, if that's not a please bring me back, please re-sign me, please come and get me play, I don't know what is. So, you know, look, if Alisson was to go, you know, then I would say bring back Kelleher. Bring back Kelleher. Absolutely bring him back for definite. And, you know, break the bank to get him back. Get him back for, you know, a fee. Or even offer them Mammalashvili in trade. You know, absolutely, you know, offer him Mammalashvili as a possible replacement. Now, you look at the other players. Now, Joe Gomez, Wataru Endo, both again likely to leave. I think, you know, Joe Gomez, I mean, rather weirdly, Joe Gomez wants to play more first-team football, even though, in fact, he gets injured a lot and can't play 3 games in a week. I think there's a good chance that Joe Gomez goes. So you're looking at losing, in effect, 1.5 positions there. I think Joe's a better right back now than he is centre-back, but he still could cover at centre-back. So you're losing Joe, who can play centre-back and right back. Endo, I think, will also move on. You know, yes, he's injured at the moment, and you know, he's probably going to miss. You know, he's going to miss the rest of the season. He may be back for the World Cup for Japan, but I don't think Endo. I think Endo may well move on as well at the end of the season. Want to go and play more first-team football, so you're automatically losing 2 there from a squad that's automatically very thin. Obviously, Virgil's got a year left. You know, Virgil, I think, stays. There's literally no chance Virgil goes. You know, so I do think Virgil will be a Liverpool player still for at least next 12 months. What happens after that 12 months is up, I don't know. I really don't know. Konate, now in terms of Ibrahima Konate, Ibrahima Konate obviously is a player who is out of contract. Now, all the conversations around Konate is that he is on the verge of agreeing this new contract. He's on the verge of signing a new deal. If that's true, then look, I don't think Liverpool go out and sign a centre-half this summer, because you've then got a situation where you've got Leone, you've got Xhaka, Van Dijk, you've got Konate, you've got 4 centre-backs there. You're unlikely to put a 5th centre-back into the mix. Now, you've got some of the young lads also coming in training with the first team squad now, Welty Lucky and Dye, you know, all training as well. They could be part of the cup games next season. So I think the likelihood that we sign a centre-half is absolutely not going to happen. You know, it definitely is not going to happen. So look, I think Canate, obviously, like I said, I think will sign his new contract now. I think the likelihood is that we will hear something in the next couple of weeks that he's signing a new deal. So, look, that's positive. Look, in terms of Canate as a player, do I have my doubts about him? Yeah, of course I've got my doubts about him. Ibrahima is a player who, is very mixed. When Ibrahima's good, he's good. But when he's bad, he's dreadful, isn't he? I mean, he really is not very good when he doesn't play well. So, Ibrahima Canate, for me, is a concern, is a worry. And I think, long-term, possibly not the answer as, the man to take over from Virgil has been the leader at the back. You're hoping maybe that Xhaka does that maybe you're looking at, you may be looking at a situation where he is taken out, he is replaced by, someone else that signed a Schlotterbeck, a Bastoni, someone else in the long term. But I don't think that happens this season. So look, I think that's obviously one stays. Kirkes obviously stays. Wirtz will obviously stay. Wirtz, you've just got to hope, I think, steps up a bit more next season. Now, Jurgen Klopp was talking about Florian Wirtz the other day. And Jurgen Klopp said that he still believes that Florian Wirtz will become a standout player for Liverpool next season, that he will be one of the top performers in the Premier League. And you can already see flashes of this man, flashes of how good he is. He's 16 goals and assists this season. You've got people talking about Declan Rice as the player of the year this year. Declan Rice has less goals and assists than Florian Wirtz, yet we're all told that Florian Wirtz is a disaster. He's a terrible player. I mean, it's just ridiculousness. It's jealousy at the end of the day. Yes, Wirtz has not performed perhaps how we would have expected him to perform this season. Of course not. But, look, at the end of the day, I believe that Florian Wirtz will come good. I believe that Florian Wirtz will be a great player for Liverpool in the future. You've just got to give him time, I think, to get into this. And I think a lot of why Wirtz has perhaps not lived up to what we've hoped he would be is, one, because, Florian is, taking time to adapt from the Bundesliga to the English game, and also the fact that Florian, I don't think has been used right by Slot. He's been used as a 10, he's been used as a left winger, he's been moved here, they've been used on the right. I do think there's an issue there with Slot using him and understanding how to use him. I think so. Maybe that's something hopefully that develops over the summer. And also, I think for Wirtz as well, one of the things he thrives on is linking up with those forward players and and he's had a situation where he's had a Katike for a bit. He then had Isak. Isak's injured. Isak's back. Katike's now injured. There's been a hell of a lot of change there. I think that also is another situation why perhaps he struggled this season. Dom Szoboszlai obviously will be here. He's under contract till 2028. Again, there's a worry over his future in terms of that contract situation. What happens with Dom Szoboszlai and his contract? The hope is obviously that Dom agrees a new deal. We all want Dom to stay. I think a lot of us believe that Dom is a future captain of Liverpool. But, at the moment, as Dom himself said, there is no movement on that contract. There is literally no movement on that contract. It is, again, a stalemate situation. And one of the big questions I always ask about this, and, given the Virgil, Trent, Mo situation last season, the Canate situation this season, the Robbo situation, now this situation over Curtis Jones and his contract, the situation over Dom. Why do we find it so hard to negotiate new contracts? What is it about Liverpool that just makes it so hard to get a new contract? Why can't we get that over the line? Why is this comment still on the screen? What comment? What comment's that Anfield Vortex? What comment? I don't know what comment is still on the screen. You tell me what comment's still on the screen. I don't know. Mate, I'm trying to do 3 or 4 different jobs at once. So if you can let me know what comment you don't like, please let me know what you are upset about. That's on TikTok. Right, look. Dom Szoboszlai, as I said, Dom is, I think, he's a vital part of this team. He's been the player of the season this season. He's been fantastic. He's a player to build around for next season, a player who can play in a number of different positions, a player who I think has a massive future at the club. So obviously he will be here next season, absolutely 100% on that one. Should we got Alexander Isak? Obviously, look. Oh yeah, I did delete those comments, mate. I did delete those comments. Is there more comments on there that need to be deleted about Hillsborough? I did block someone earlier for making comments about Hillsborough. But if there's more comments there, I apologise. I'm trying to talk, produce, moderate, and everything all at the same time here on YouTube and on TikTok. So obviously, please, let me know. 3 comments still showing. Like I said, I've tried to delete them all. Hopefully, they're gone now. But, anyone who takes the piss out of Hillsborough, anyone who mocks Hillsborough is a disgusting, horrible human being and doesn't deserve to live amongst normal human beings. They really don't. They're just disgusting individuals. Alexander Isak, obviously, I think, can have a big season next season. The big hope is that Alexander Isak goes on to stay fit next season. That's got to be the big hope, is that Alexander Isak, can stay fit. That Alexander Isak can be a big part of that. And look, one of the big worries with Alexander Isak is Liverpool knowing how to use him. I mean, that's the big thing. I think, we do still seem to struggle with knowing how to play him, how to use him, how to get the best out of him. And I think part of that is that we're not used to having a number 9. And I think, one of the big things we've got to do this summer is bring in wingers, whether that be Barcola, or whether that be Diamonde, or who that is. We need to bring in wingers to help service Isak. We need as well to develop the relationship between Wirtz and Isak. Now, I do believe that Ekitike, once he's back and fit, can play on the left-hand side of a front 3. He does that for France. So, I think that is something that can help. And I think if you've got a front 3 of, say, Diamonde, Isak, and Ekitike with Wirtz in the midfield as well, you've got a very attacking, very positive, aggressive team. So absolutely. Martin Flatbread says, Isak's been a professional footballer for 6 years and has spent 4 of them injured. I mean, this is the big worry. And this is one of the things I said when we signed him, Martin, was his injury history isn't great. And the hope, hopefully, is that we can keep him fit. But, it is a big worry over him. His injury history isn't great. It hasn't been great. He's missed a lot of time with injury. So, one of the big things, hopefully, is that we can keep him fit, we can get him fit, and we can positively, use him next season. Hopefully, having another striker perhaps coming over the summer. Ekitike been there. Maybe, you rotate him. You don't use him in every single game. You use him as you need him. And you keep him fit for longer. Maybe that's the way forward. That could be something that definitely could be positive and happening. Alexis McAllister. Look, Alexis McAllister is a concern, especially given this comment that's come out from Paul Joyce today. There is a doubt surrounding the future of Alexis McAllister. His camp said no negotiations were presently taking place over an extension. Now, of course, the thing is there, he has obviously he's got 2 years on his deal. And as I've said on multiple videos, 2 years is the optimum time to extend a player's contract or to sell a player, because that's when you get the maximum value. Now, Alexis hasn't been good this season. He's been poor this season. Yes, I think was a lot better in the Palace game. He's up for one of the performances of the week in the Premier League this season, in this week, for his game against Palace. But Alexis has struggled this season. He really has, and he hasn't looked the same player that he can be. So, look, Alexis McAllister, again, there's question marks over his future. And I think, the stories and the rumours linking him with Madrid and Barcelona, they haven't helped either. I think they've been a distraction. So, there's a question mark over Alexis's future. Now, if Alexis was to move on, does that make it more likely that Liverpool move for someone like an Adam Wharton, Elliot Anderson, someone of that ilk to come into the midfield, alongside, Dom and Ryan Gravenberch. Curtis Jones, big questions over his future, and we'll talk about Curtis in a moment. But, Alexis McAllister, well, there is big issues and big questions over his future. So what do you do with that one? Where do you do with that? Where do you do with that one? Where do you go with that one? Guys, obviously, please, if you're watching on TikTok, tap the screen and help the likes. If you're on YouTube, smash a like on the video. Guys, if you're watching on TikTok, come and check us out on YouTube. Hit us a sub over there, please. Right, we know that Salah's leaving. He will need replacing. And then we've seen, obviously, reports to Barcola, reports linking us to Diamonde. James Pearce today saying that Liverpool are not interested in buying Anthony Gordon, which, that's fair enough. I think he's a player who divides the fan base hugely. There's players who, there's guys who think that Anthony Gordon's great. There's people who think Anthony Gordon's terrible. If you were Slot, would you be keeping Gakpo and McAllister, says Kieran. Kieran, I would certainly definitely keep McAllister. I think at post-World Cup, he comes back a better player. Alexis McAllister is a top quality player. And I think if we can get him under an extension, yes. Cody Gakpo, no. I would sell Cody Gakpo this summer. I really would. I think he's become too predictable in the Premier League. There's too many teams, apart from Everton, who seem to know how to mark him up and how to stop him. And I think he's become too predictable. So I would definitely sell Gakpo this summer, mate. 100% Bayern, Atletico, whoever wants him, get some interest in there. Kieran, thank you very much for your question. Conor Bradley. Look, I love Conor Bradley. Conor Bradley is one of my favourite players. Conor Bradley is one of the players I really like. You know, he is a good player. He's a good player. I like Conor Bradley. I do like Conor, but his injury history is not great, is it? I think the hope with Conor is that maybe, just maybe, he is a player who hopefully will be like Stevie G was, that he'll grow into his body, that he'll develop, and that as he strengthens as he goes along, that he won't have as many injuries. But, you know, you've got to hope that Jeremy Frimpong can improve as a right back, and Jeremy Frimpong and Bradley can become that solid right back partnership, and they can split the games between them. So yeah, that's a big hope. JPS92 asks, do you think Alisson will leave this summer in your opinion? I don't think he will. I think Alisson will stay for at least another season. I don't think Liverpool can afford to let Alisson leave this summer because he's an experienced player, because he's such a good player and he's a leader. And, you know, with Robbo going, with Salah going, you can't rip all of your leadership group out in one summer. You know, the indeterminate factor here, JPS, is this. What does Alisson think? You know, if Alisson genuinely doesn't want to play for Slot anymore and genuinely doesn't like Arne Slot, there's not little we can do to stand in his way. So that is the big worry. But I certainly hope that he is going to remain with the club for the long term, for at least his contract anyway. Chiesa, I think, will leave this summer. You know, Federico will want to play more regular first team football. He doesn't get that at Liverpool. I think, will return to Italy. So I think, you know, that's another one we need to replace this summer, is Federico Chiesa. Leone, obviously, I think, you know, he's looking great. He's coming back. He looks really strong. He looks ripped, actually. I don't think we've seen the pictures, but he looks absolutely ripped. So I think, obviously, we have Giovanni Leone. Will stay for next season. Curtis Jones. This is one that is a big, big question mark for me. Curtis wants to stay. That's clear. You know, Curtis has said that he wants to stay. You know, Jones prefers to stay at Liverpool, but he wants to be a starter. And if that isn't guaranteed, he might consider leaving the club to further his career. You know, Curtis has reached a point now at 25 where he needs to play more football. And yes, as Wasim Ahmed says, Curtis to Villa. You know, Aston Villa reportedly interested. Spurs, if they don't get relegated, are reportedly interested. Inter Milan interested. Coventry City reportedly interested in Curtis Jones. So there's a lot of clubs seemingly wanting Curtis. But I think whether or not Curtis stays or whether or not Curtis goes depends on two factors. One, what happens with his contract. If Liverpool offer him a decent contract to stay, you know, does he stay? That's the question. I think he could well do if Slot gives him certain guarantees of more playing time, and he gets the wages that he wants, and he gets the length of contract that he wants. Wasim says Spurs are going down. A Lincoln away, LA. I think Spurs could go down. Yeah, absolutely. I do think they could actually go, which would be hilarious if they do. I've got nothing against Spurs. I just think it'd be really funny if they go down. Also, I think what happens with Alexis McAllister this summer as well. I think, you know, if Alexis was to leave this summer, then I don't think it's likely you sell Curtis Jones as well. You know, you don't rip your midfield apart to that extent, especially as, obviously, you know, I don't think we're going to bring in any more than one, maybe two maximum midfielders. In an already thin squad. So to me, it would make zero sense to sell Curtis as well. So I think a lot depends with him what happens with Alexis this summer. But it is concerning over Curtis and the homegrown quota as well. You know, Curtis leaving, Joe leaving, you know, Harvey Elliott probably being sold as well. What happens there? You know, what happens there? Diamonde to replace Salah. Yes, I would love that, Wasim Ahmed. I think Yan Diamonde would be a great replacement for Mo Salah. He's a great player. Cody Gakpo. Look, Cody, I think, will stay. I think it's already been said that Cody is staying. I personally would sell Cody. I think he's been figured out in the Premier League. The only team that doesn't seem to be able to know how to play against him is Everton. But yeah, I think Cody will stay. Hugo Ekitike. Look, Hugo is a massive part of the future of this football club. Massive part of the... David Cogan, I take it you're a Man United fan, saying keep Slot. You must be a Man United fan. Hugo Ekitike is a massive part of the future of this football club. Absolutely huge part of the future of this football club. And is a... Who do you support, David? And he is a great player, Everton fan. Should have sold Gakpo and kept Diaz. I agree, Wasim Ahmed. Absolutely. But I think the Diaz situation was complicated by the fact that his contract was crap and he wanted to leave, I think, you know, from what I've heard. But yeah, Hugo, obviously will take time to come back. Now, the big worry, of course, Paul, you're a Liverpool fan, mate. I've got to say, I disagree with you. I honestly think if Arne Slot stays next season, he's gone by November. He'll be sacked by November. There's nothing I'm seeing in this team that tells me that it's improving or getting better. It's the same week in, week out, the same old shit week in, week out, struggling to win games, playing poor football, moments FC, relying on individual moments of brilliance from players to win games. So I don't think we do improve next season, mate. Sorry about that. I disagree with you on that one. Ekitike, like I said, it has a big future, this football club. But the big worry with Ekitike for me is, he's coming back from a conceding late goals. We do. I think Ekitike, the problem with Ekitike is that he relies on his pace and his sharpness and his quickness. And one of the big concerns over Hugo coming back from a ruptured Achilles is he going to be the same player? Is he going to be the same player that he was before that injury? There's always that situation where when you come back from an injury, you worry about that injury. You worry about it going again. You worry about the impact of it. So it's going to take time for him to get back to being the player he was previously. So, Hugo will come back at some point next season. We're going to be a long way into next season by the time he's back. We're talking about 9 months in. If you're talking 9 months from now, you're talking December, January time before he's even anywhere near the first team squad. So, it is a big concern. And it's a big concern over what happens with him in the future. And I think this has made the fact that we need to buy a striker this summer even more important. Or a player who can play in those striking positions because of that injury to Ekitike. Because you can't be going into next season just relying on Alexander Isak and, say, Jadon Danns, who is always injured. So Hugo Ekitike, to me, is someone who will have a massive future at the club. But does he come back the same player? Does he come back and be as good? That's the big, big question for me as a player. And I think he will do. I think, he is a phenomenal talent. And I think I see, to be honest with you, I see elements of Thierry Henry in him. I really do. I see elements of Thierry Henry in him. I think he's a top player. Mamoulaşvili will still be here next season. Like I've said on the video earlier, I don't rate Giorgio Mamoulaşvili. I don't think he's number one. Robbo will go. Woodman, I think, hopefully will stay as our third choice. Frimpong will stay. You've got to hope with Jeremy Frimpong that he can grow into the role as a right back. If we're going to keep with the back four, that he can play that. Wasim Ahmed, Kolo Muani on loan. Mate, I don't want Kolo Muani anywhere near our team. He's shit. He is a dreadful footballer. Seen how bad he is at Spurs? Absolutely no way, mate. Do I want Randall Kolo Muani anywhere near Liverpool Football Club? But like I said, the big thing with Frimpong for me is hopefully he comes back. Hopefully he comes back and is a quality player again and can grow into that role as a right back going forward. Gravenberch will still be here next season, but the big thing with Ryan Gravenberch for me is he's not a 6. He is not a 6, and we've got to buy a 6 this summer. Who that is, I don't know. I haven't got a massive scouting network like professional football clubs, so you've got to hope that that if he is going to play a big part in Liverpool's midfield next season, that we do bring in a real 6, someone who is a real holding midfielder who can protect that back four, can work in the transition, can start attacks off, can work through it. Pesci obviously will still be here. Nioni, I think, will still be here. Bajetic, look, he hasn't played a game in 3 years for Liverpool. I don't know what's going on with him. Really don't. Reece Williams, I think, will go. Calvin Ramsey will go. Calvin Ramsey, obviously we saw at the start. I think, around the turn of the year where we didn't have a right back. He was the only fit right back. The manager didn't use him. He has no future at this football club. Absolutely zero future at this football club. James McConnell, hopefully, will be a player who kind of breaks through and plays a little bit of a part next season. Rio Ngamoa, for me, Rio Ngamoa has to be a much bigger part of Liverpool Football Club next season, has to play a lot more games next season, because whenever he's played in the Premier League, he's been man of the match. He's been by far the most exciting player on the pitch. So I really hope that Rio Ngamoa is a big part of our future and plays a lot more next season, and the manager uses him a lot more next season. So my hope is hopefully, that he comes in. Morgan Rogers says, I can't see us moving for Morgan Rogers. He's more a 10. We've got Wirtz, we've got Szoboszlai. I don't, do that at all. Christ, mate, you support mate, you support the club your family do. You support the club where, you've got family from. You support the club that you want to support, mate. Support where you're from, mate. Fuck it. I don't want to. I'm from the northeast of England. I don't want to be a Sunderland fan. I don't want to be a Newcastle fan. So fuck it, mate. Please don't tell me a glory hunter. Yeah, okay, mate. Whatever. Go fuck yourself. Christ 1792. Who do you support? Let me know who you support, mate. You know what? Go. I don't care. I don't care what you think. You're just a prat, absolute massive twat, huge idiot. Right, let's have a little look. You're an Everton fan. Oh, what a surprise! You support the Tin Pot Club, the little club from Merseyside, a team that ain't even as big as Tranmere. When was your last trophy win, mate? When was the last thing you won? When was that? Tell me that, please. Glory Hunter 4 Eyes. Oh, now we're getting personal, right? So you've just got yourself banned because you're getting personal. The moment you start with personal insults, you're gone, you twat. Hate Evertonians. Hate Manx, hate Evertonians. Absolutely. Oh, we've got Man United fan going about Scouse accents because, of course, let's face it, most Man United fans have Cockney accents. You know that, don't you? Anyway. But look, in terms of the players who are out on loan, look, Harvey Elliott, look, I like Harvey as a player. Slot doesn't like Harvey as a player. I think if Slot is still here, then Harvey is going to go. I think Harvey will be sold this summer. I don't know where to, but I think Harvey will be sold this summer, which is a shame. I think Harvey could play a part. He's a good footballer. I like Harvey Elliott. Yaros obviously will return from loan at Ajax. I've got big hopes over Yaros. I do think that Yaros could be a big part, be a future Liverpool number one if we can't get back Kelleher. I like Yaros. I think he's a good footballer. I really do. I think he's a good keeper as well. I think he's probably better than... he's a better keeper than Mamardashvili. So yeah, I'd like to see Yaros come back and have a chance to prove himself. He certainly seemed to be doing well at Ajax when he was there. So yeah, for me, yeah, get him in. And the last one obviously is Kostas Tsimikas. As I've said, before when I was talking about Robbo leaving, Kostas, to me, I like Kostas. I love the lad, of course I do, but he's not good enough to be a Liverpool player long term or be the primary backup to Milos Kerkez. Look, that squad, I think, we could be looking at a situation where we're losing a lot of players from that squad. It is a concern. It is a big worry that we could lose a number of players. And it's then about what replacements come in. How much do Liverpool spend? We were told that summer was a one-off. And, we had Arne Slot saying we have to sell to buy. So it looks like there are players going to go out. But how much money is going to be outlaid on players? What players are we going to sign? Wazim Ahmed says, do you think Konate will leave? No, I don't. I think he'll sign a new contract, mate. That's certainly what we're hearing, is that he will get a new contract very, very soon. Look, in terms of players coming in, we've been linked with Bradley Barcola, Yan Diamonde. And if you want to know, I've just put out a video actually on YouTube talking a little bit about the stories linking us to Diamonde and Barcola. Go and check that out. It's on YouTube now. It's called what's it called again? What's the video called? Let me just remind myself of what that video is called. Sign Van de Ven from Spurs. I mean, he's certainly someone who's been linked. I personally don't rate Van de Ven. I think he's a bit dodgy as a defender. He's certainly not as good as Virgil, or even Konate to some extent. But yeah, there is a new video out on the channel now. On the Liverpool channel, please obviously check that one out. It is around the players that we've been linked with. Denials and Departures, I think it's called. Give it a check out, guys. Porthos says we won't get the amount of assists from a left back as we did with Robbo. Absolutely spot on, mate. I don't think we will. Robbo, along with Trent, absolutely fantastic footballers. Absolutely fantastic footballers in terms of assists. No matter what you think of Trent, call him a rat, call him whatever you want. And did you see him getting the piss taken out of him by Danny Carvajal yesterday? He was doing this on his watch about because Trent was taking so long to get back. Yeah, Denials and Departures. It's just come out on the channel. Check that out. It is talking about Diamonde. It's talking about Anthony Gordon, Alexis McCall, all those different stories. Robertson won't join Spurs. No. We miss Trent. I think, to some extent, you're right. We do miss Trent, no matter what you think of Trent. I think Trent was a big part of the club and the way we played. His passing, his quality was definitely there to be seen, mate. Absolutely, Porthos. Good shout on that one. But, look, I think this summer we need to buy a six. We need to buy a couple of wingers. We need a striker now. I think centre-backs dropped down the list because of the fact that, obviously, Konate looks like he's going to sign a new contract. So, look, it is a summer of change. It is a summer of big change, I believe, coming up at Liverpool Football Club. And my worry, like I said, is it becomes another transition season. It was absolutely Porthos. Trent's play with Salah was immense. Yeah, absolutely. His link-up play was very good with Salah. Absolutely, absolutely massively agree with you on that one. Right, guys, that is it for this afternoon. I will catch you very, very soon here on YouTube, obviously, and across on TikTok. Obviously, please, on YouTube, if you can hit a sub on the video, please do that. We'll be back, obviously, with more videos, more lives. We're back tomorrow morning live. Come and check us out on that one. Also, as well, come and join in the channel by subscribing, ringing the bell, then you'll never, ever miss out on the content. Thank you so much for watching the Liverpool FC Wire podcast live. I've been Owen James, and it's been a pleasure speaking to you as always, guys. Catch you very, very soon.